It's never too late to review and speak on the most important books that I read in 2024. So let's just get into it. The first honorable mention that I have is The Swimmers by Julie Otsuka, and this is the story of a community of swimmers of an underground pool, and they end up finding a crack at the bottom of the pool and the consequences that lays out for each of the swimmers. The story ends up following one swimmer specifically, Alice, as she begins to lose her memory, and it turns into a story about grief and loss and dealing with someone who is suffering from a sharp mental decline. And the really great thing about this book is that it deals with such heavy topics in a way that makes you feel like you're wrapped up in a safe space and that everything is going to be all right in the end, even though you know what the end is going to be. So one of the ways that Julie Otsuka is able to accomplish this is really with her writing style. She takes on, it feels like, the tranquilness of water with her writing. So if you're a Pisces, if you like water, if you understand how water can be a very calming force when you are dealing with the weight of the world above you, you might really enjoy The Swimmers. The next honorable mention I have is Hangsaman by Shirley Jackson. This is the first book that I've ever read by Shirley Jackson, and it was phenomenal. It is about 17-year-old Natalie as she is transitioning into her first year at college and how lonely of an experience that can be, especially as she's moving away from her father, who has controlled most of her life. As she becomes more and more lonely, she also becomes more and more uncertain of what is real and what is not. And as a reader, you're also on that journey with her of trying to figure out, did this actually happen? Is she experiencing this, or is this just a haunting of her imagination? And I think it deals with specifically women's mental health and the descent of that in such a careful way. So one of the most beautiful things that I think Shirley Jackson does with this book is that she takes a trauma that happens to Natalie and she reflects on the memory of that trauma from Natalie's perspective in a way that really showcases the mind's ability to separate the self from an actual event and how lonely that experience from certain traumas can be. So it is heavy, it walks you to the edge of despair, but I think Shirley Jackson does something that's very important, and that is she walks back with you from the edge. At least that's what I think happened at the end of the book. Again, what was real, what actually happened, I don't quite know still, and that's okay. I think that's totally fine that I don't have a clear answer of what actually happened in this book. Now on to the main list of the most important books that I read in 2024, and this is in no particular order. The first is actually two books that I'm gonna combine into one because they're by the same author, and that is The Wager by David Grann. And I think that the subtitle of this book precisely encapsulates exactly what it's about: a tale of shipwreck, mutiny, and murder. So it is definitely high drama on the high seas. It is about a British naval vessel in the 1740s that is shipwrecked and how the surviving members of the shipwreck split into factions and how those two separate factions end up finding their way back to England with two separate stories of how they got shipwrecked in the first place and what went down while they were shipwrecked. David Grann really has a way of writing captivating history, and he ultimately ties this tale back to colonialism, and he implicates that Britain tries to rewrite history of why this shipwreck happened in the first place. Now, if you're like, I can't do nonfiction, it is available on audio and it is narrated masterfully by Dion Graham. And if you're still like, I don't know if I can do a story from the 1700s and shipfaring, then might I please suggest you check out David Graham's other book, Killers of the Flower Moon. After I read The Wager, I immediately ran to pick this up, and I even started it on audio like I had The Wager, but this became so captivating to me that I had to pick up a physical copy and actually physically read it. Killers of the Flower Moon is the tale of the Osage Nation in the 1920s and the racial conspiracy to essentially annihilate all of them because they were the richest people per capita in the world at the time. And it is unfolded from the perspective of the Texas Ranger who is leading the newly minted FBI's crime division. They are trying to solve the murders of the specific family at the center of this story, Molly Burkhart and her siblings. They start to notice a pattern of not just the people dying in Molly's family, but everyone in the Osage Nation. It is truly heartbreaking. We hear about the wrongdoings, for a lack of a better term, and the mistreatment of natives in America, but to read about specific conspiracies happening to get rid of them is more than eye-opening. So the next read that I have is Dracula by Bram Stoker. Now, normally I reread either Dracula or Frankenstein every Halloween, but for the last few years I had just been rereading Frankenstein because it's short, it's sweet, I love it. I chose to reread Dracula this year because Nosferatu was coming out at Christmas, and I thought, I love vampires, so why not give it another go? And I was not disappointed. I was reminded that I love a gothic romance. So Dracula, of course, tells the story of lawyer Jonathan Harker as he goes to Transylvania to meet with his client, Count Dracula, in his castle in the Carpathian Mountains. And it soon becomes clear to Jonathan Harker that Count Dracula has plans of his own to come back to London and take over the whole city and turn each and every one of them into vampires, including Jonathan Harker's own wife. I think her name is Mina. And so begins the classic vampire story. This inspired me to put a few more vampire reads on my winter TBR shelf for 2025, and so I will be reading Interview with a Vampire by Anne Rice and Carmilla. Another important read for me in 2024 was Grey Dog by Elliot Gish. This is the story of Miss Ada Bird. She's a 30-year-old spinster who has to take a new teaching post in a very rural and religious community where no one knows her secrets. So everything seems to be going pretty well for Ada until she starts seeing weird things in nature happening in the woods next to her school, and her past really starts to bubble up with all of its shame and grief, and the secrets that she was running away from start catching up to her. I would say that Grey Dog for me, it gives, is wickedness thrust upon you or are you born wicked? For me, that's what it gives, but just like scary. If you liked The Witch, then you might like Grey Dog. Grey Dog does a really great job documenting the creeping, slow descent into madness that a woman can have after repeated traumas and after trying to suppress who she really is for so long. Next up, we have the shortest book on my most important reads of 2024, but also the densest, and that is James Joyce's A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. This is a semi-autobiographical tale for James Joyce. He fashions the main character, Stephen Daedalus, after himself, and he documents his life growing up and going to Catholic school and discovering himself as an artist, specifically a writer, within that time period. This asks very philosophical questions and it answers them as well. So if you're into a very heady look into art and what art is, what is beauty, what is God, what is religion, then this is the book. She's very intellectual. Okay, if you have never read a classic before in your life, you would not want to start here. This edition is about 250 pages, but it took me a while to get through this. But I think that the writing is very stream of consciousness, especially in the beginning, that you really have to just buckle down and work your way through to get to the good parts of this where he is asking the most important questions. And for me, I tagged those questions along here, and you can see they sort of come pretty far into the book. Just be prepared if you do pick up James Joyce. Now, the last book on my most important reads of 2024 is Blacktop Wasteland by S.A. Cosby. Like everyone else who has read anything by S.A. Cosby, I have nothing but praise for this man and his writing. As they all say, it is so cinematic. This specifically is the story of Beauregard, and he used to be a getaway driver, and he has left that world behind, and he now lives the clean life as a mechanic with a wife and children. But due to a series of financial calamities, he is then sent back into the world to do one last diamond heist that goes incredibly wrong. The characters are unforgettable. The writing is top tier. Again, just all the praise that everyone gives S.A. Cosby. If you're in a reading slump, check out Blacktop Wasteland. If you don't have anything else to do, read Blacktop Wasteland. It's such a great book, and I do have more S.A. Cosby on my reading list for 2025. These were the best and most important books that I read in 2024 for me, and I either really fell in love with the writing, a character, I was fully immersed in the story, or I just really felt that my soul was impacted by the storytelling in some sort of way. And yeah, those were the most important reads of my 2024, and I don't really know how to end this, so we'll just end it.